you've probably seen in your programs, the theme for our breakout workshops this year is winning the campus. So namely, how do we take this message of marriage, family, and sexual integrity and make it attractive and compelling to our campus communities, engaging those who agree with us, those who perhaps are on the other end of the ideological spectrum, as well as finding and engaging the faculty or staff or ministry leaders on our campus who can also help us communicate this message, be supportive of the students on your campus. So speaking to this today, we have a panel of three good friends of the network. I should say I'm Cassie Huff. I'm the former director, now senior advisor to the Love and Fidelity Network. So it's a pleasure to be able to moderate this panel today, especially with good friends speaking to you. We have Luciana Milano speaking to us from Harvard University and Audrey Pollnow from Princeton University. And since we're running behind, you have their bios in your programs. You can read that, or perhaps you've already read it. We also have Professor George, who will be coming to us from another session. So without further ado, we'll just get started with our first speaker, Luciana Milano.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you very much for inviting me to speak today. I'm really honored and really grateful that you guys chose this talk. I actually remember sitting here about 2 years ago, frantically taking notes as a freshman, being exposed to all these new ideas and areas of research. And I left the conference really inspired and enlightened, but I was a little hesitant to take a more active role in True Love Revolution, now known as the Harvard Anscombe Society. My role model and predecessor was always so articulate and eloquent, and was very well respected by our peers, many of whom strongly disagreed with us. I learned a lot from the former executive board, and I've greatly benefited from what they left in place. But as you know, the university is a place of constant change, where students come and go. Relationships with student groups must be fostered and maintained. It's crucial to maintain these relationships. And it is also important to look for ways to ensure the longevity of your group. One of these areas is within the university itself. Reaching out to professors, academic staff, and student groups have proven to be one of the most beneficial endeavors of our group. Unfortunately, as a freshman, I didn't seize this opportunity at all. In reality, I was really intimidated and unsure of how to talk to a professor outside the classroom. I was unsure about what I would talk about, or if I disagreed with my professor, how I could express myself and how would that affect my grade. But by sophomore year, I had a much better feel for the campus culture and had made a small group of friends who shared my worldview. Two of my closest friends were the leaders of two other conservative organizations on campus. And we knew that at Princeton, the Anscombe Society hosted this thing called the pro-life, pro-family reception that had over 20 faculty co-hosts. We were really jealous of Princeton, and we still are because you guys have Dr. George. But we were really inspired by him, and he really encouraged us and motivated us to go out and look for faculty that supported us. But it was really difficult to determine where to start. As I thought about this, I realized I had never even sat down to have a conversation with our faculty advisor. So that's where we started. We sent him an email introducing ourselves, voicing our concerns, and asking for a time to meet with him. Over the course of the semester, we met with various professors and academic staff, and I wanted to share a little bit about what I learned. First, it's always really important to have goals when you go into a meeting. In our case, the primary goal was to get to know the sympathetic faculty and staff. We hoped that this would ultimately lead to a pro-family, pro-life reception, but our relationships continue to bear fruit. But before approaching faculty, there are some important things to keep in mind. Do your research. Know who you're meeting. You might be surprised to find that they have written or spoken about topics that might relate to the mission of your organization. And you can use these areas and topics to bring up in conversation and even perhaps mention in your introductory email. So we began, like I said, reaching out to our faculty advisor. And we came to this meeting with a game plan of getting to know him and also really expressing our concerns about some of what was going on at Harvard. I suggested, and I suggest, bringing a sample of the work that you do. So whether you have published articles in your student newspaper or have hosted events, bring a sample of what you've done to these professors. Professors are really busy people, and they are doing research, and it's really easy for them to get caught up in what they're doing and not really see what's going on campus, like what is going on in your life. So bringing clippings of recent articles from your paper can be really helpful to let them have an idea of what's really going on. Another thing that I suggest is bringing articles of very controversial, inflammatory things that people have said and done. And when we met with our professor, one of the first things that I brought up is I said, by the way, did you know that Harvard is having its first sex week this year? And like the face was shocked. I was like, what? How did I not know about this? I'm like, yeah, they've been planning this event. It's going to be a week-long thing. And so it's really important to bring these concerns to your professors because they want to help you. And many of them have asked me to update them and to send them emails on when things like this happen. So I started sending emails when certain events came up and providing links to the controversial things that I found controversial on campus. And what was really special was that shortly after, professors started sending me emails with links to articles that they had found and read in the paper. So that was just so inspiring to see that they started to really care and kind of engage in the conversation that we were having. So what I learned from this experience is that it's really important to follow up with your professors. After that initial meeting, send an email. Write a thank you note, like a handwritten thank you note. That will go so far. Another example of the work that we've done and how it's paid off is this summer I was sitting at home reading the Wall Street Journal, and I came across an op-ed called Welcome to Freshman Disorientation, written by one of my professors who I had had a conversation about. And she mentioned the True Love Revolution in the article. And I was stoked. She highlighted our mission, and she pointed out the deficit in supporting faculty. And it was really a challenge to professors to unite behind students who have these sometimes dissenting views. I want to share another way in which these meetings really paid off. And the way that you can gain strength in numbers. Every time you meet somebody that is sympathetic to your cause, ask them if they can put you in touch with somebody else who they know who is also sympathetic. Don't be afraid to ask your professors or if they know teaching fellows or other professors or alumni who share your views. It's kind of amazing to see the people that they've sometimes taught or that they have connections to. You'll quickly find that your organization will gain attention and that your views are held by so many more people than your small group of friends. But also don't be surprised to find or look for support in disciplines outside of the humanities or areas that you wouldn't usually think of. I'm not a science person at all, but I managed to find a physics professor who supports us. In fact, he runs a blog called Harvard Conservatives, and he's invited me to blog about social conservative issues. But I also want to talk about some of the challenges that I faced in meeting with professors. Like I said, professors are really busy people, and sometimes if they've never met you, they won't read your email or, they have a lot of things going on. But there are ways to overcome these challenges. As I'm sure you guys know, professors have office hours, and many times students don't go to them. So find the time that your professor has an office hour, and if he's busy meeting with another student, maybe you can leave a note, and it'll definitely get their attention. There's one particular example that I won't forget. There's this one professor who I'd been trying to get a hold of for an entire semester, and no email replies, no luck in office hours. And it was about the end of the semester, and we were about to host our first conservative reception, and I really wanted his reply because I really wanted him to be a co-host in this reception. But I didn't know how to get a hold of him. And I was walking out of the library like the week before the event, and I saw him out of the corner of my eye. So I ran as fast as I could and caught him in the vestibule. And I said, "Professor, hi, I'm Luciana." And I spoke as fast as I could in like a minute, tried to explain everything that we had been trying to organize for about a semester. And he was very sorry that he had not replied to my emails or seen them, and promised that he would try his best to attend the event. And he did, and it was very special. So I guess the lesson from that is don't be afraid to go the extra mile, literally. So now I would like to shift and talk about the importance of building relationships with supportive student groups. Very similar to reaching out to professors, there are many opportunities where relationships with student groups can be long-lasting. One example is in campus chaplaincies. Harvard is very diverse in this respect, and we have reached out to members of the Latter-day Student Association, the Orthodox Jewish community, Christian evangelical groups, Catholic groups, and Muslim groups. But this is an area that's been more difficult navigating, and yet our efforts have been very fruitful. One way that I found that is important to engage chaplaincies is by diversifying our programming. So for example, our conservative reception this past fall, we invited Rabbi Meir Soloveichik, and we saw this huge attendance of the Orthodox Jewish community. So that was one way in which bringing in a speaker of a different viewpoint brought in a group of people of a different viewpoint. But bringing people of different disciplines and social groups can also really help strengthen your group. I always tell students at the meetings to bring a friend, because people will go to meetings where their friends are, because they want to see their friends. So I think that finding ways to diversify the makeup of your group can really pay off in growing the group. But another area to look for relationships and to build relationships is within political organizations on campus and within campus publications. So these are slightly more challenging, and you have to be very careful. But in the recent presidential election, for example, the recent presidential election has really lent itself to dialogue about issues pertaining to our group. For example, Romney's comment about binders and women, and Obama's commercial campaign where the campaign compares voting for the first time to losing one's virginity. And although we're not a political organization, we see where we can really enter the conversation that exists within the political community. So don't be afraid to seize those opportunities. Another thing that I mentioned is building relationships with campus newspapers. This always reaches has much greater outreach. An op-ed can often lead to an influx of emails saying, "Thank you so much, I really agree with you," and you'll meet people you never would have met otherwise who want to get involved. So I really want to also encourage you to look for people to engage with people who disagree with you. And this has been one of the most challenging things, but can also be very, very fruitful. We had dinner with the presidents of the Queer Student Association, for example, and they expressed desire for an abstinence message in the queer community. And I was really grateful that they voiced this concern. And so we're looking for ways to be able to work together, even though we might disagree on some policy issues, for example, we still can agree on some principles. And the other thing is that I would really like to stress is be ready to face criticism, and don't be afraid. Be ready to engage with people who agree with you, but like to play devil's advocate. Be ready to engage with people who agree with you, but aren't willing to agree with you and defend you in the public sphere. And last but not least, be confident and smile. This really has paid off for me. So I want to leave you with a verse that I really have taken to heart, and that is Peter 3:15. Always be ready to give a defense to everyone who asks your reason for the hope that is in you. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Audrey, as Cassie said earlier, and I'm the president of the Anscombe Society at Princeton. And the Anscombe Society at Princeton, I think, has been around since 2005. Is that right, Cassie? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so since 2005. So it's a pretty well-established organization. And we've benefited from a lot of the work that Luciana just described. Students before me who went around, and Professor George who went around finding professors who were sympathetic, setting up the pro-life, pro-family reception that happens 3 times a year, and basically just building a network of support. And that's been very helpful for us. It means we can focus on other things. We can spend a lot of time writing articles, hosting discussions, sort of expanding the discourse to more student groups, especially people who disagree with us. And it's something that requires a little bit of maintenance. So if your group finds itself in this position, it's definitely worth doing. Hosting the reception, it's not that much work. And it really is valuable because you go and sometimes the work can be difficult and sometimes you feel like you're not making as much of an impact on campus as you would like, but you go and you see all these professors, all these people in the community who support you, who are really invested in what you're doing, and it can help your group to maintain momentum. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about how you design events and do postering campaigns and write articles and that sort of thing, especially with groups and targeted at people who do not agree with you. And since the goal in those situations, basically the goal of everything we do at the Anscombe Society is to change hearts and minds. So I think it's helpful to think of things in terms of whose heart and mind are you trying to change, and then how are you going to do it? So often that's going to involve meeting people where they're at. If I'm writing an article in the campus, it's called the Daily Princetonian, the campus publication here, I'm probably not going to say, the natural law teaches that fornication is wrong, unlike what you might think, all of you who support the natural law, but also support fornication. Like, that's not going to be that's not going to be sort of the person who needs to be convinced, who's saying like, no, I really think the natural law says this. The article that I need to be saying is, maybe there is this thing that we can talk about called right and wrong, or maybe moral questions actually are important for discussions of sexual ethics on campus. Sexual ethics is a real thing. And a community is a place where it's appropriate to discuss it because your sexual decisions create a culture which affects me and my sexual decisions do the same. And reason can be applied here, which is actually a claim that I think most students at Princeton probably disagree with, but is a claim that they should agree with. And that sort of needs to happen before we can have the more fundamental discussion. So I'm going to talk about a few events that we've done and sort of the audience that they targeted and the strategies that we used for them, just to give a few examples. So last year, or I guess a year and a half ago, we did a poster campaign. We do one every year at Valentine's Day. And this poster campaign, since it is a poster campaign, is probably going to be pretty modest in terms of the effect it can achieve. It's not going to be able to get someone philosophically from way over here to all the way over here. So our target audience was the whole campus, and our aim was to discourage hookups. And we wanted to discourage hookups that are motivated by what's called pluralistic ignorance, which is, if any of you have taken alcohol EDU, it's this course that we were required to take before coming to Princeton, where they say, like, you might think all of your classmates are binge drinking every single night, but they're actually not. And a lot of social science studies have shown that when students believe that everyone around them is engaging in an activity more than is actually happening, they themselves are more likely to engage in it. So we looked at the data. We found out that only we found out that 3/4 of students in any given year on campus are either abstinent or have a single sexual partner. And we thought, well, I mean, ideally that number would be 100%, but it's probably a lot higher than people thought. So we basically made posters that said, not everyone's doing it, and we put that statistic on it, and we put them all up all over campus, and we actually got the administration to sponsor it, so they paid for all the posters. And they were successful. A lot of people who do not like us, who think that our positions are, that our beliefs are too extreme, or that we try to apply too broadly personal decisions or something like that, a lot of them still liked it and found it helpful. And I thought that was very successful because first it helped us, it was just worth doing. It's good for people to know that. It's good for people not to hook up because they feel pressure to hook up. And just when people are not hooking up, that's good in itself, obviously, but it also makes it easier for them to get the message, oh, maybe there are real reasons why chastity is appealing and a positive thing. And then it just built up goodwill between us and the administration and sort of signaled to the campus that we actually are committed to people's good. We're not just sort of reactionaries, or we feel upset that people don't agree with us, so we want to complain about it or something like that. Another event we bring a speaker to campus every year, sometimes twice a year, and we brought this woman who is a blogger named Eve Tushnet, and she did a wonderful job. She is a lesbian who's a Catholic and who is celibate because she accepts the church's teachings on sexuality and chastity. So she basically came and she spoke very compellingly, but we decided, okay, well, this will be a great event to get a lot of LGBT students to attend, and students who are interested in LGBT issues. So we emailed the LGBT Center, we emailed a lot of friends, and we got a great turnout for that event. We posted the campus pretty effectively with a quote from a New York Times article about her. It said, "The gay Catholic voice against same-sex marriage," and a lot of people came to that. But she was wonderful, and she was a good example of putting the conversation in a way that's going to be appealing to people and that meets them sort of in the space that they're in. So she's not a philosopher, even though she's philosophically very intelligent, probably a better philosopher than I am, but she spoke a lot in terms of narrative. She spoke in terms of her own personal experience. She has a lot of appreciation for the queer community and values it highly, and sees gay people in America as sort of pointing to something that America has lost, which is a value for same-sex friendship in a robust way. And so that was a really good place to just sort of acknowledge something that's valuable with a group that I think people assume that we're opposed to, and also to have them come and listen to their arguments, to see this is a really good woman who's intelligent, who's thought about these things, who's sympathetic to us, and she still supports chastity, so that can be a more compelling view. Another event we've held, which I recommend basically that any Anscombe Society or any True Love Revolution group or anything like that hold, is called Ask an Anscombe or Anything. And we don't actually have a particular target person for this event. It's just open to the whole campus. So people can come, a group of students in the Anscombe Society will sit, we have dinner, and they can ask us any questions. So they might say, like, why do you believe this thing about hooking up? Why do you believe this thing about gay marriage? And we answer on behalf of ourselves. So it means that if you're an evangelical Christian and you think, well, at the end of the day, my religion is like a definitive reason for this thing, you can say that. Or if you think that contraception is wrong, the Anscombe Society does not take a position on contraception, but a number of its members do think that contraception is wrong. They can discuss that in sort of explaining their account of sexual ethics. This event, I think, has been really fruitful because it allows people to talk to us in a way that is more personal, and it also helps us to practice making the arguments in the way that you actually are going to make them, which is not going to be generally standing at a podium. It's going to be in your eating club, in your dining hall. A friend of yours says, like, oh, I think this is so stupid, or oh, I thought this was really interesting, or you think this, right? And being able to answer, and sometimes those conversations are difficult or awkward. And maybe you know how to have them in the context of, like, well, supposing it is the case that Proposition A, I mean, a lot of the people in our Anscombe Society are philosophy majors, so it can kind of turn into that. But just being able to say, well, like a lot of the speakers earlier today have spoken about saying, well, it just seems to me that that this is a path to a happier life for these reasons, but still being able to do that with the full force of kind of your more robust philosophical understanding. And this, I'm just going to touch on another point of advice that I have for people in Anscombe societies. Really write if you can, because it helps you to develop your arguments and to just have them sort of like at the forefront of your mind and being able to say, oh, well, no, I've thought about this, sort of to get to the bottom of things, and try to get other members of your club to write as well for the same reasons. Let's see. And yeah, I mean, that is most of my advice. I would say, you know, in articles, you want to take the same approach that you take in events. You want to meet people where they're at. You want to distance yourself from opinions that people might think that we have that we don't have, or if there's a position that people think that we have that they think is offensive and it's not necessary for your argument, make it explicit in your argument that that's not the thing that you're relying on to claim this further thing, but that it is, you know, whatever thing that's more compelling to them. Yeah, and I would also say in terms of events, just to make sure you avoid debates that are on unfair terms. This hasn't happened to us before, but I know that this is something I've heard of happening. You know, someone says, oh, do you guys want to debate same-sex marriage or something? And then the debate is framed in terms of, is homophobia bigoted, yes or no? And you know, you don't want to be the person saying, oh no, homophobia, I'm homophobic, but that's not bigoted, you know, because that's not a fair debate, and hopefully you're not homophobic, and you know, and maybe that's not even an appropriate term. And so, yeah, so be careful about that. But yeah, that's largely what I would say. I would again echo a lot of the advice from earlier today, just about being optimistic. This is something where we actually do have the right answer. The account that we have is the only one that's both coherent and that actually is consistent with like human experience, so what it means to live a human life. And it's actually the answer that people long to hear. And it will often seem that they do not long to hear it, but it's something that they really want. And so in your friendships, in your discussions, be a real friend to people. And a lot of your friends won't agree with you on these things, and it's good to be friends with people who don't agree with you on these things, because they will push you to be a better person, and you can show them what you think about this. But it really is a place where you can reach out to people and say, I care deeply about you, and therefore I'm going to communicate this to you in the terms that are accessible to you at the place where you're at. Maybe we won't agree, but to have that be something that you're reaching out to them with. Yeah, and that's about all.
I think you should be bold. Now, bold doesn't mean reckless, it means bold. The difference between bold and reckless is you're bold if you know what you're talking about, if you've mastered the argument and you can take on the counter arguments. Okay? You're only reckless when you go barreling in and don't have any idea what you're talking about and don't know what to say. Okay? So be bold. But that requires the work of learning, the work of mastering the arguments and knowing how to respond to the counter argument. The currency of academic discourse is reasons and arguments. It's understanding the reasons, understanding the arguments that's the key really to the mission. I also think it's very, very important to create alliances for students, and especially student groups, to create alliances. That means you need to be reaching out across ethnic and racial and religious lines. This is terribly, terribly important. When groups become overwhelmingly Catholic or overwhelmingly evangelical or overwhelmingly Mormon, it doesn't seem anymore like it's devoted to a cause other than the cause of whatever that particular faith happens to be. So they have to be truly interfaith, and that means doing the reaching out. Reach out to chaplains. Try to find out what students from their different groups might be interested in being involved in something like this. See if they will be themselves supportive of what you're doing. Announce your events and announce your meetings at their Bible studies or at Mass or at their religious services, whatever they are. Now, very often you're going to find that the religious leaders are nervous and are worried about alienating people and don't like controversy and stuff like that. You have to kind of gently remind them that they're religious leaders and that, this is a very important cause and it needs to be promoted and respected. We need to reach out to groups that very often people don't even think about. The Muslim community, the Orthodox Jewish community. Far too often, when it comes to these issues, or sanctity of human life issues, people don't even think about our allies and colleagues in those other traditions. We just think of them as Christian issues. Well, they're not just Christian, they're human issues. And some of the greatest witnesses we have are not in Christian communities. They're in Muslim and Orthodox Jewish communities. So reaching out again across those lines is terribly important. Not only your religious leaders, but let your faculty know that you need their support. I think Cassie can tell me if I'm wrong about this, but I think that what has made our success at Princeton possible in part has been strong faculty support for the Anscombe Society, for Princeton Pro-Life, for student initiatives. Well, that doesn't just happen. Students have to help to reach out to faculty. Now, faculty who are on board can, of course, reach out to other faculty, and that's key. But you need to be in touch with any faculty who give you the slightest hint of sympathy for your cause. That won't be a whole lot of people, but that will be some at every university. And you need to reach out to them and just ask them for their support. Maybe a particular faculty member will come and meet one evening with your group when you're having a meeting, or attend one or two of your events, or get involved in some way. Again, going to your religious leaders to ask them if there are any faculty who are associated with their campus ministry that might be sympathetic to what we're doing is a really great idea. So go to the evangelical leaders. Go to the Catholic priest, if you've got a Catholic priest who is sympathetic to our cause, or the imam on campus who runs the Muslim student group, or the Orthodox Jewish chaplain. Now, obviously, not all religious traditions are going to be with us on this. I mean, you're probably not going to get much help from the Unitarian Universalists. They have a different view. That's fine. We understand that. But among those faiths that do hold to these basic teachings, there are potential supporters there. There will be faculty members who do attend their Bible studies or do go to Mass or are involved in one way or another with religious services. And those are people that should at least be given the opportunity to support you.